Hello, welcome back to the Get Lit Masterclass video number 2. My name is Jamie Pettis and I specialize in helping women overcome and transform their relationship with alcohol so they can get back in control. And in today's video, we're going to be learning all about how to reprogram our bodies and our minds in order to unlearn the desire to drink. This is really cool stuff and can totally transform your life if you let it. So let's dive right in. We're actually going to cover 2 things today: unlearning the desire to drink, and I'm going to be talking a little bit about how to naturally raise our dopamine levels, because if you remember in video 1, dopamine plays a really significant role in the reward center and in the habit loop that perpetuates our desire. So it's a really great idea to implement some things that will raise your dopamine levels naturally. Not only do you just feel better in general, but it also helps with those cravings and urges. So just a little review from video number 1. This is the habit loop, and so we're going to kind of be dissecting this a little bit and explaining a little bit more about how the habit loop works. First, you have the cue or the trigger, and this can be a thought, a feeling. It can also be a circumstance, a smell, a time of day, a person, anything that happens that consistently produces a strong craving or urge to drink in you is a trigger. For example, for me, a very strong trigger for me is when I was all by myself, left alone, and I knew that I wasn't going to be around anyone or see anyone until 24 hours later. I knew that I had an opportunity to drink and not get caught, and that produced a really strong urge to drink in me. So that was a trigger for me that was very strong when I was trying to get back in control and I was trying to cut back and trying to quit. That was a very strong urge. A time that would really come up for me was when I was all by myself and I knew that I could, quote unquote, get away with it. Some other really common triggers are feelings of stress and anxiety. That feeling after the end of a long day, or if you're like in the middle of some really stressful times or situations or stressful experience. And a lot of times that triggers the urge of like, I want to drink, I need a glass of wine to relax. That's a very strong trigger for many, many women. Or a time of day, 5 o'clock, time to open that bottle of wine, or maybe coming home from work and relaxing with a beer or whatever it is for you. So that is when that craving or that urge starts. And then, of course, we follow it up with the habit or the action, which is, in this case, giving into that urge and having a drink. And then we're rewarded with that huge flood of dopamine, and then we get that feeling of relief that provides us that feeling, that really good feeling. It's temporary, though. That's the thing that we have to remember. It's temporary. And ultimately, alcohol is a depressant, so we have to drink more and more to get ourselves back to kind of a level playing field with our dopamine. So it's this vicious cycle. Anyway, that's the habit loop. And we practice that over and over and over, just like creating the grooves, that rutted road that we talked about earlier. So this is essentially an example of classic conditioning or programming, and I like to talk about Pavlov's dog because we've all heard of that experiment, and we kind of know, that the scientists would ring the bell, and they essentially conditioned the dogs to start to salivate at the ringing of the bell because they practiced feeding the dogs immediately as they were, right after they rang the bell. So eventually they took away the food and they could just ring the bell and the dog's mouth would start to salivate. That's exactly what we're doing with drinking. We have the cue, and we have taught ourselves to desire the alcohol. We salivate for alcohol. So again, in video 1, I mentioned the good news is if we've programmed ourselves to desire that alcohol, we can actually reprogram ourselves to unlearn the desire to drink And we're gonna get into that now. So it's not a problem. It's simply a pattern. And I like Jim Rohn's quote. He says, "Life doesn't get better by chance. It gets better by change." And that is absolutely true. When we are not happy with the direction that a certain pattern or habit in our life is taking us, we can switch directions. We can forge a new path, but it takes a lot in the beginning to grab hold of that wheel, wake up, and make a conscious choice to like steer the wheels out of those grooves and out of those ruts. It takes a lot of kind of effort and a lot of strength and a real strong desire to go somewhere else. We get out of those ruts and we decide where we want to go, and we start down a new path. And the more that we practice that new path, the more that this old path kind of falls away. We're facing towards a totally different direction. And as we practice, then those ruts and grooves grow deeper and deeper. And that becomes our new pathway. This pathway becomes irrelevant. We almost forget about it. And this new pathway of, the life that we have purposely created is where we're going now. So that's what we have to do. We have to learn how to interrupt the pattern and forge a new pathway. And you can move into a new groove. You can move into a new pathway by changing and creating new thoughts, new feelings, new behaviors, and eventually those will become your new habit. So first, what we have to do is we have to identify our triggers. So in my program, in my 6-week program that I'm inviting you to be a beta tester for, we're going to just really work together and create a personalized plan. We're going to really dive into discovering all of your triggers. I'm sure there are a few that come up when you think that, oh yeah, these are the times that I always like to drink. These are the times that I crave. But there might be some others that you haven't thought about. And so I've created a lot of worksheets and things like that of questions that you can begin to journal about and write about to help you really uncover all your triggers, because we really, really, really need to have a lot of clarity and understanding on what are the things that are causing us to trip up and go down this path that we don't want to go down. So, again, really investigating the feelings, the thoughts, the circumstances, situations that really cause you to want to drink. And some examples could be in the circumstances category. It could be, when you go out with your friends or when you go out to a bar or get-togethers, you have that strong urge to drink. Maybe when going out on a date gives you a strong urge to drink. Or as an example of some feelings would be feelings of sadness, or boredom is a big one. And I would say the top emotion that women that I work with that are trying to buffer and run from is anxiety and stress. Loneliness, there's a whole laundry list of uncomfortable feelings that we don't like to feel, and we try to numb ourselves or buffer ourselves from those feelings by drinking, and those become our unwanted habit loops. Or it could just be a simple thought that you have practiced over and over and over your whole life, just getting a thought of like, I want a drink. A drink sounds nice. I deserve a drink. Let's celebrate. I had a great day. Or I need a glass of wine. I had a bad day. Whatever that thought is that triggers that strong urge. So really identifying your triggers is the first step. And then the second practice or skill is called learning how to be the watcher. And you may have heard some other terms for this, but you being the witness, the watcher, the observer. This is a neutral position where we really apply a lot of acceptance and a lot of curiosity, and we kind of step back and we practice observing our behavior and observing our feelings and observing our thinking. And you're going to immediately get a benefit from this, because there is actual relief in shifting your perspective. So essentially, this practice or this skill is about recognizing that you are not your body, you're not your thoughts, you're not your feelings. You are the actual observer of those things, and you can start to watch how you respond to situations and how you react to situations, and, you know, looking at your emotions that are going on and the thoughts and all that stuff that's going on inside. And the more that you practice this through active awareness and active consciousness, what you're going to do is create a space between the stimulus and the response. And in that space is where choice is. And so when we can step back and we can observe, what we're doing is we're allowing ourselves to get the space and the pause to choose how we want to respond, how we want to act in this particular situation. And again, as that space grows and as you practice, the more and more freedom you're going to feel in those choices. So this is a really wonderful skill to cultivate, and it does take practice, but in my program, we're going to be going into much more detail on how do you do that. We're going to be going into a couple different tools and techniques that are going to help you with overcoming those cravings and those urges next. But when you're experiencing an urge or a craving, we essentially have three choices. Okay, first we can give in to the urge, obviously, and that's what we do most of the time. That's what's created that habit loop. 2, we can resist it, which is pretty miserable. Another term for this is called white knuckling it, right? So I've talked to women before, they're like, oh yeah, I quit drinking for 30 days or however long, and it was just miserable, it was terrible, it was awful, it was the most excruciating experience. Well, that's because they were resisting those cravings and those urges. They were really white knuckling the experience, and that is really not fun. It's really, really hard to sustain that's where you have to use a lot of willpower, right? You have to use your willpower not to do something or to do something, whatever it is. And we do not have an unending supply of willpower. We have a certain amount of willpower that when it's exhausted by the end of the day, that is why we give in to our urges. We have a hard time, and this information, by the way, is all the same with whether you're over drinking, whether you're overeating, whether you're over social media, whether you're overworking, whatever it is. If it's a compulsion, if it's a habit loop that you've created that you don't like anymore, all of this stuff applies. So number 2, resisting it with willpower, which is not a long-term sustainable way of doing it because your willpower runs out and you end up failing. Or number 3, we can learn how to allow it. So the key here is learning how to accept, experience, and truly feel the urge as it comes, because the fact is it's actually like a wave. Urges are like a wave. We have that impulse to, engage in the habit, and there's often a physical experience of sensations going on in the body, and they're truly like waves. They come, they rise in intensity, they peak, and then they lessen, come down, and eventually wash away. So urge surfing is actually a technique that there was a psychologist named Alan Marlett, who was actually a pioneer in the field of addiction treatment. And he came up with kind of the term urge surfing. And so this concept is really learning how to ride the wave of your craving or your urges. And this is exactly how to eventually surf the wave in a really fun way, and eventually those waves lessen and they end up going away. Just like the grooves in the old path, if you start to practice a new path, that old path is going to be forgotten, and eventually you're not even going to think about it. So with urge surfing, there's 3 phases. As I mentioned before, you have kind of that ramp up period before, and that trigger point where you first get the idea to engage in the unwanted behavior. And then you have the peak of intensity, and it comes to this high point of the urge, and then the ramp down or fall off period as things gradually end up returning to baseline. So This says that in order to urge surf, the first step is to breathe deeply and truly allow yourself the willingness to reduce the urge and let go of that behavior, the unwanted behavior, as a solution for your problem or your pain. So it's essentially like really consciously bringing your awareness to your breath and really like opening yourself up to be willing to just ride that urge and allow it to be there. And then step number 2, this says to remove yourself from the situation if you can. Now, I kind of have a different idea about this, a different opinion on this, because first of all, if removing yourself from the situation and distracting yourself is the only thing that is going to help you not engage in that behavior or not, have the drink or whatever it is, then you should do that. Definitely do what works for you, right? So if you're at a point where you need to distract yourself, you need to call a friend or go for a walk or take a bath or make some tea or go to the gym to distract yourself from that urge, do it. If that's the only thing that's going to stop you from drinking. However, the ultimate goal is to not run away from it, to not distract yourself, and to really learn how to be in the feeling of it, to really hold space for it in a really non-judgmental way, and to feel the sensations in your body and learn how to ride that feeling all the way up to the peak and all the way down. So step number 3, this says to relax the body and to practice breathing or calming techniques while staying mindful and present focused. So one thing that I like to encourage my clients to do is, if you can, when you're experiencing a craving or an urge, if you have something to write with, you could even probably like on your phone take like a voice note or a voice memo, but I don't know, there's something kind of cathartic about writing. But in your journal, you can pretend like there's this Martian that has come down to chat with you. And this Martian has never felt a feeling. It's never felt a craving. It doesn't have the same kind of body that you do, and it doesn't really understand what an urge feels like. What is an urge to drink? What does it feel like in your body? And so what I want you to do is I want you to begin to write down like how you would explain to this Martian what it feels like in your body and what you're experiencing. And what this does is it gets you out of your head and into your body so that you're really focused on the present moment. You're focused on your body. And this does the same thing that I mentioned before. It immediately provides relief because you're shifting your perspective, getting out of the head and into the body, and really, really allowing yourself to feel it and to focus on what's going on for you. That really helps with urge surfing. So the thing is, and we get more into this in my program, but learning how to process emotions in a healthy way is a really important skill to have. And they don't teach us these things in school. Most of us don't grow up with super emotionally intelligent people or parents that teach us how to be in touch with ourselves, be in touch and allow our emotions and process our emotions in a healthy way. For most of us, we are run by our primitive brain in that it wants to avoid pain, and it perceives uncomfortable emotions as like danger. This is an uncomfortable emotion. It's painful. We need to run. We need to numb. We need to distract. We need to avoid at all costs. That is what your primitive brain is saying. When an uncomfortable feeling comes up, it wants to run. It wants to buffer itself from that feeling. So the skill is learning how to allow. Here's the deal. Like, all those uncomfortable feelings are just part of the human experience. We all have them. And if we can learn how to be with them, accept them, feel them, and allow them to just kind of move through our body, oh my gosh, talk about so much freedom in so many different areas of our life, because we will no longer be at the like beck and call of our emotions and trying to run from things. We're able to face things head on. Learning how to not be afraid of an uncomfortable emotion is so powerful. It's so powerful. So I wanted to kind of talk about a couple examples of allowing an uncomfortable feeling, because we all do this, but it's usually only when we're forced to. So as an example, like going to a doctor or a dentist, not all of us have, kind of that uncomfortable feeling when we go to a doctor or dentist, but I certainly do. Like drawing blood really makes me nervous. Drilling, I'm not super happy or excited when I have to go to the dentist. And that is an example of being in that uncomfortable feeling and allowing it. It's something that we have to do, so we're going to do it, and we're just going to feel uncomfortable until it passes, right? Another thing is sometimes we put ourselves in these positions with like scary movies or roller coasters. We are purposefully putting ourselves in what could very well be an uncomfortable feeling for many people of being scared or being nervous. And we do that and we kind of ride it out, and we just allow that feeling to be there until it moves through us and ends, right? So again, that skill of recognizing our feelings and allowing it, holding space for it, is truly so powerful in so many different areas of life. And practice really, really is the key. It's all about practice. And so in my 6-week course that I'm inviting you to be a beta tester for, we are going to practice this skill among many other skills. And if you have any questions about it, because I'm kind of lumping in a lot of information into a short period of time, and these concepts are kind of bigger ideas or bigger concepts that take time to really fully understand and to be able to practice. But we're gonna hold each other accountable. We're going to create personalized plans and practice these really powerful tools to really get in control of our lives, and not just with drinking, with everything. These techniques work for all patterns of negative thinking that are causing you suffering. So, through all of this, one hugely important idea is to practice self-compassion. And I know this is kind of an overused thing, self-compassion or self-love. And it might sound corny, but truly it's so important for us to just recognize our humanness, recognize our programming, recognize what's going on, the pain that we might be in, and really kind of empathizing with yourself in the way that you would a friend or a lover or a child. In her book, Radical Acceptance, Tara Brach, she says it like this: instead of resisting our feelings of fear or grief, we embrace our pain with the kindness of a mother holding her child. And in that self-compassion and in that safety, it provides so much more opportunity for us to change and grow than when we're being hard on ourselves and, being just downright cruel. It's very hard to change when there's not a lot of self-acceptance and self-compassion. So that is, again, another skill that is really important to practice if we want to change our lives. So that is a couple little techniques on how to ride the urge. And here's the deal. What if I told you that if you successfully practiced urge surfing 100 times, without giving into the urge and without resisting the urge, but truly riding the wave 100 times, that your urges and cravings would be gone? Would you do it? Would you practice? Do you think it'd be worth it to be totally free of the desire to drink? I personally think absolutely 100% it is, but it's an experiment. 100 is not the magic number. We're all at different places in our lives. Some of us have practiced certain habit loops a lot longer than others. And so I think 100 is a good start though. So here's my challenge to you. I want you to get out a notebook or your journal, and every time you feel a craving or an urge coming up, you mark that in your journal, date it, and then I want you to do that practice in your journal where you're describing the sensations and the feelings in your body as if you were explaining it to a Martian. And I want you to really practice that reign of self-compassion and really try to breathe into that and allow yourself to feel it. Have a lot of grace, a lot of compassion on yourself. And that is one little mark. I want you to do that 100 times, and I guarantee you that the cravings and the urges, if they're not gone, they will be minimal and so manageable, and you're going to find so much more freedom in your life. Now, there are other aspects, many other aspects to finding true freedom, because even if you're not feeling the physical cravings or urges, there might be some belief systems that you're still holding on to that are creating that cognitive dissonance that we're talking about. So maybe you're not physically craving, but emotionally you're desiring the alcohol. And in my program, we dive into that as well. So I teach you how, you and me, we learn together how to change our belief systems so that they line up with what we desire for our lives, and so that we can live into that highest version of ourselves. And then we can truly have the freedom, because not only are we going to not have any physical cravings or urges, but we're also going to have the belief that not drinking for me is the best choice. I feel better. I feel great. It's healthier. I love my life. I don't need alcohol to have fun. All of those beliefs, you can reprogram yourself to truly change your beliefs so that they're supporting your desire not to drink. And that's what I've done. It's a process. It's practice. It takes time, and it takes practicing the skills that I'm going to be teaching you in the program, but it's so worth it. I promise you that. So next up, we're going to quickly go over some ways that you can raise your dopamine levels naturally. So I don't have a lot of time, so I'm just going to run through these, but they're going to kind of give you some ideas of things that you can start implementing into your lifestyle to help you feel better, to help those dopamine levels rise, to help you feel better. The better you feel, the better you do. It also, all of these activities help support your prefrontal cortex, which is the part of your brain, as I mentioned in video 1, that allows you to plan ahead, make decisions, and decide how you want to live. It's the part of you that can think about your thinking. It's the part of you that can create that choice in your life. So it's really, really important to feed that prefrontal cortex, and these all are ways that you can do that. So the first one is exercise. This gets preached for everything. Exercise is kind of the wonder drug, right? But it actually really does not only increase dopamine levels, but also dopamine receptor count and dopamine activity. So, they say ideally to get at least 30 minutes of exercise to get your heart rate up, to really take kind of full advantage of this. But you can also get noticeable results in just 10 minutes of low impact exercise. So this article I was reading says that exercise also signals the brain to release serotonin and endorphins, which are obviously two other feel-good chemicals that the brain uses to help you feel good and reduce levels of harmful stress hormones. So I know it's oversaid, it's overtaught, it's overemphasized, but that's because it makes a huge, huge difference. And so if you can find something that you love to do it. Even if you have to just get out, go hiking, walk your dogs. Find something that you love, though. I think that's really important. Find something that you love. Try all sorts of stuff. in my program, we have a section where we talk all about physical activity and movement and finding things that you love doing. And it's super fun because my background is in personal training and gym management, and I was a health coach for years. And so this is something I'm passionate about, and I love helping women make exercise their passion. So the second thing that helps raise your dopamine levels is tyrosine in your diet. So unfortunately, there's no such thing as a dopamine pill. But so essentially, so it's not, meaning dopamine isn't something that we can ingest. Our body produces it on its own. But we actually can eat a diet that helps with this and kind of provides the building blocks to synthesize dopamine. And one of the main dietary considerations in facilitating dopamine production is the amino acid called tyrosine. It's kind of the precursor to dopamine. So tyrosine can be found in many foods, and I'm going to read you off the list. Meat, egg, dairy, fish, and poultry. And I'm just going to do a little plug for the source of your meat, and your dairy is really important. So if you can do organic grass-fed, and if at all possible, locally sourced is ideal. So we've got bananas, avocados, apples, legumes, nuts and seeds, watermelon, oatmeal, beets, and green leafy vegetables. So write those down and start adding more of those into your diet to increase your levels of dopamine production in your body. Number 3, sunshine. We love sunshine. And actually, we need exposure to bright light in order for our bodies to turn tyrosine into dopamine. So, you essentially can consume all sorts of tyrosine in the foods that you eat, but without exposure to light, and ideally sunlight, your body is not going to be able to process it into dopamine. So they've also, in addition, found there's been a link between a lack of sun exposure and reduced dopamine receptor count. So they recommend 30 to 60 minutes of sunlight each day, and that'll ensure your body synthesizes the dopamine and prevents light-related reductions in dopamine receptors. So get outside, get your sun intake. Number 4, do you ever notice that listening to music makes you feel really good? And there are studies now that link, they found a link between listening to music and dopamine release, which is awesome. So even the anticipation of listening to music can stimulate that. And you can easily, benefit from this just by listening to your favorite tunes on a regular basis. Like, if you always forget to, turn on your music or listen, just start putting little reminders in your phone to put on an awesome playlist or listen to great music in the car, because this literally affects your dopamine in your body and makes you feel better. Number 5 is to relax more. I love that these things are all recommended things that we need to do to feel better. Relaxing. The deal is we all have a lot of stress in our life, and they've shown, as I mentioned in video 1, prolonged exposure to stress reduces dopamine levels. It also reduces the functioning of the prefrontal cortex. So it's super important that we get to the source of the things that are stressing you out, causing you anxiety, and we practice figuring out a way to reduce those, but also figuring out a way to relax more. Really cutting out as many of those stresses in your life is super important. And then also really developing good, healthy coping methods for de-stressing and relaxing. So some things like yoga, massage, mindfulness meditation therapy, they're really, really great ways to relax and de-stress. And they've also been found to increase dopamine levels in the brain, which is awesome. And then the last thing that I want to mention that raises dopamine is to challenge yourself. So, dopamine obviously plays a really big role in behavior and motivation. And essentially, when we accomplish a goal, our brain releases dopamine. So, setting and achieving goals is a really great way of increasing dopamine in our system and makes us feel so much better. So, even each time, if you have like to-do lists and each time you check off something on your task list, they can be even little things like making your bed or taking out the trash or whatever. Your brain kind of rewards this sense of accomplishment with a little dose of dopamine. So, those are the 6 things that I mean, there's more, but those are the 6 main things that I want to mention. So you can combine a few of those, like the exercise, the sunshine, and the challenging yourself by, maybe going outside and going on a big hike or coming up with a physical challenge that you can do or train for. That's a couple things that I love doing that really helps me keep my dopamine levels up. And so in the next video, I'm really looking forward to discussing the 4 additional skills that you can begin to practice in order to really let go of the over drinking, the habits of over drinking, and really learn how to get back in the driver's seat, really find a lot of freedom and joy in your life in not just drinking, but in every area. So please stay tuned for that. I'll see you in video number 3.